You are listening to Middle East Monitor Conversations, bringing you lively discussions with prominent voices from the region and beyond, as we delve deeper into issues shaping the Middle East and North Africa, from politics, the culture, and the arts.
Hello and welcome to a conversation with the Middle East Monitor. My name is Nassim Ahmed and I will be your host for today's discussion, which will be about a recent report by the Israeli human rights group B'Tselem, who published, I think it was last week, a shocking and highly comprehensive report on the torture and abuse of Palestinians in detention centers. Titled Welcome to Hell, it exposed the Israeli prison system as operating like a network of torture camps. The report has been covered extensively by many mainstream organizations, and of course, the Middle East Monitor has also covered the story. B'Tselem does some amazing reports. One of the most famous one was a few years back when it exposed the apartheid system, two-tier apartheid system in Israel. Joining me to discuss the report is Shai Parnes. He's a spokesperson for B'Tselem to unpack details of the report. So, Shai, thank you for giving us your time. Welcome to a conversation with the Middle East Monitor.
Sure, thank you for having me.
As I mentioned, I mean, the report is titled Welcome to Hell. That's not a description which you gave. That's actually a description, a quote from an Israeli soldier, which seems to be an extraordinary admission by the Israeli soldiers themselves about what is basically happening behind the walls in those detention centers. So talk to us about that and just generally begin with giving us an overview of how this report was compiled and its main findings.
Okay, just a small correction. It was a quote by Israeli prison system guards, which are not soldiers. They are part of national security administration under Ben Gvir. And okay, but as you said, let's start in the start. At late November, early December, there was this Israel-Hamas exchange deal, and we got the first testimonies for several women detainees released who were imprisoned after October 7th, and we got this quite a few, 3 or 4 testimonies about what's going on in the Israel prison system after October 7th. And okay, it was shocking and horrific, but still we believed and thought it's incidental. It might happen to them, but it's not. We don't have any more testimonies reporting about that. It just those, maybe just those women with those in this facility. And as weeks goes by, more and more West Bank prisoners were released from Israeli prison system. So somewhere around February or March, we got those pretty much the same rough line of testimony of what's going on in different facilities, from men who were West Bankers men who were released, who were imprisoned after October 7th and released. And then we said, okay, well, like the bulb turned on and said, okay, there's something extraordinary going on. And we started collect more and more testimonies. And in the final report, there's 55 testimonies from both genders, male and females, West Bankers, Gazans, East Jerusalemites, and 4 Israeli Palestinians, which are citizens with this blue ID. And from different cities in different times since, and in 16 facilities, 13 of them are Israeli prison system, 3 of them are military prison facilities. What was pretty shocking is that basically they all tell the same story about constant beating and violence, about lack of sanitation and hygiene, about overcrowded in the cells, in cells that's supposed to be 6 or 8 inmates. There was sometimes up to 14, and about constant degradation, humiliation, sleep deprivation, and even the amount of the non-food they got, it was pretty much similar from all over the facilities. And that's why our conclusion in this was it's systematic and routine. Actually, just a couple of weeks before publication, the name came up. We didn't know how to call this report because we were preoccupied with the work, and also for us as an organization and as a team, it was a very difficult mentally report to work on, to meet those torture victims again and again, and to ask them for more verification and more validation about what's going on and hear their story. And then someone who read Fuad Hassan testimony said, "Welcome to hell." And the reason, as you said, it's both prosaic, but it's captured the essence of what Israeli prisons have become. And no matter why you got to the to prison, because all 55 of the prisoners who were interviewed to this report released. So yeah, a lot of them weren't, most of them were not even charged with anything. But as soon as you enter as a Palestinian, no matter where you're from, you can be a Gazan, but you can be a Palestinian citizen of Israel from Haifa. As you're a Palestinian who entered Israeli prison system after October 7th, it's going to be hell for you.
Thank you for that broad answer, Shai. What was fascinating for me, I mean, even I didn't know this, is that the profile of the prisoners. As you mentioned, these are prisoners not just from Gaza, detainees from the West Bank, but also Israeli Palestinian citizens of Israel. And they're all treated in more or less the same way. The report is based on, as you said, 55 testimonies, but there seems to be a tip of the iceberg from what I read. And also, I mean, the focus has been on Settlement, where there was allegations of rape, or the Settlement detention center, but it seems to be a much broad network of prison camps. So the question I want to ask you is, just give us a sense of the network, not just this prison detention center, which has had the most focus, which is Settlement. How many detention centers are there? And also the kind of, because we've heard of sexual abuse, we heard of torture. So what are the nature of the abuse that is taking place in those prison centers?
So Israel has its own definition. They call it security prisoners, which is pretty much reserved only for Palestinians, this definition as a prisoner. And it doesn't matter if you were charged or you're an administrative detainee from the West Bank, or if you're a Gazan who are held under a different law, which is illegal combatant law. And as long as there is a section in a facilities, wherever the Israeli prison system holding Palestinians as security prisoners, that's where we found those acts. And as I said, and also you put it, it was pretty much similar stories. As I said before, in March, there were stories, more and more stories from Gazans, from older people, from young people, 21-year-old female from Hebron, and a 53-year-old from Haifa, a Palestinian citizen, which is a lawyer. He knows the law. So it didn't really matter who you were, on what you were, why were you even taken to the facilities. You got those amount of violence, sleep deprivation, a lot of complaints and stories about the cold. Let's remember it was during November, December, January, February, which is winter in Israel. Sometimes they say they were even got the windows taken off the cell. They took their mattresses away, they took all their belongings, they left them with just one shirt and one underwear and one pants, sometimes for weeks and weeks. Sometimes 1 hour a day for a cell with 14 males, 1 hour a day of running water, both for shower and toilet. So do the math. And with 2 drops of shampoo for each. And again, it's a repetitive story from people who don't know each other, from different cities with different locations and different ages, different genders, and in different times. Some of them were released in February and some of them in May.
Can you just provide, for my own clarification, I mean, I'm slightly confused about that as well, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners are. How is it that the Israeli law allows Palestinian citizens of Israel to be prisoned in the same detention center as Palestinians from Gaza and West Bank? How is that allowed?
Pretty much what happened in reality that just after October 7th, they got this, it's not quite a law, but it's an order by the government, which is in times of war, according to the Israeli apartheid regime, can be taken for a few weeks as an emergency. And over that, and how people were really felt here, Israelite, they were really afraid, they were really in anxiety, because what happened in October 7th was really horrific for Israelis. And the government pretty much used that, I would say, in a cynical way, to promote their own sadistic and racist agenda. And pretty much all the system, the guards, the legal authorities crumbled down to this policy, which was inspired by Ben Gvir, who's in charge of the Israeli prison system, and the government.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, on the October 7, for many Israelis, felt like it was a license to be able to do whatever they want. People like Ben Gvir, which probably explains one of the most shocking things I read in the report. It describes how there are tours organized for civilians, Israelis, to showcase the abuse of Palestinians in the detention center. I mean, can you just give us more details of that and what that speaks to? I mean, I found that quite shocking, the fact that there are organized tours for Israelis to witness the abuse that's taking place in the detention centers.
There were some media outlets about this, showing pretty much PR items about how Israel is treating inmates for now. One of them was in even Channel 13, which is pretty mainstream. But it was pretty much early during the war. I believe it was around November or so. And yeah, there was a sense of revenge, also driven by the government, because I said it before, the government used the Israeli public opinion or feelings of anxiety and fearfulness because what happened in October 7th. So those with power just were using what's going on, and people here went to the reserves or helping those communities evacuated from Gaza, from around Gaza Strip. And so, yeah, Ben Gvir and the government used what was going on to promote their agenda. And as soon as this government took office and Ben Gvir took office, it was on their agenda. They were saying that all over and in the media to worsen Palestinians prisoners' condition.
So we mentioned Ben Gvir, some of the far right members of the Netanyahu's cabinet, but I think we need to be careful not to simply say whatever's happening probably is as a result of 7 October, because your report does mention that the prison system is really part of a much broader framework used by Israel in its occupation, in its domination of Palestinians, and in preserving this apartheid system in the West Bank and in Gaza, which B'Tselem famously also documented, I think, 2019 with all the other human rights group. So you do see the prison system not just simply a product of Ben Gvir, a product of the far right extreme leaders, but really more, a part of the matrix and the apparatus of the apartheid system that's been installed over Palestine even before 7 October. I mean, that is something the report mentions, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly as you said, there is I would say, a small chapter in the report called the Israeli Apartheid Regime Incarceration Project. And yeah, as you said, the story of Israel Incarceration Project did not begin on October 7th, nor with Itamar Ben-Gvir appointment as a minister. It goes much deeper. Since 1967, there's some estimation between academics and researchers and journalists who are investigating this, that up to or approximately 800,000 Palestinians were imprisoned by Israel. That means 20% of the total Palestinian population between the Jordan River and the sea, or 40% of all Palestinian men in the region. And when you incarcerate so much people in a society, it's not only affect the prisoner himself. It affects, of course, the prisoner himself first and foremost, but it affects his family. Sometimes he's the only provider or the main provider, or sometimes they have to save money, because when he'll go out, he wants to learn or to work or to do something, and they also have to give him money to buy groceries in prison, per se. So yeah, it's hurting him, it's hurting the family, it's hurting the community, because in those numbers, sometimes a lot of a percentage from a certain village or a certain city, and we know about this collective punishment or mass detentions. So it happens to the community, and those numbers, it break down the whole society apart.
And that was one of the shocking statistics. 40% of all Palestinian men have been incarcerated at one time or another, which is, if you think of the impact this would have on a society where men are the main breadwinners, I mean, that's civil, generational loss after loss after loss. I mean, how does a generation recover from that? And another thing I found quite shocking was the sheer number of Palestinians that have died in Israeli prisons. You documented 60 prisoners who have died in custody since 7 October alone. That's a horrific amount. So can you share some of the information on the circumstances of how these 60 detainees were killed, and if they were actually charged or not. I don't think they were even charged for anything. So they were, nevertheless, they were killed they died in prison.
Yeah, so you pretty much asked a couple of questions, and I will address both of them. Yeah, we're saying at least because it can be higher, but we only said those cases we know of. Those consist both West Bankers and Gazans, and there's pretty much three main reasons. One is during transfers between, sometimes from Gaza to Israel proper prison facilities. During those transfers where those Palestinians, Gazans were beaten to death. Sometimes in prison, and there's, I believe, 2 reports of that in the Welcome to Hell report, of inmates who were beaten to death in jail. And another reason is the pretty much lack of or mistreatment of medical teams. And also there is one testimony about that, who was a prisoner who was, even before October 7, in Israel prison, and he was doing pretty much okay. He has a problem with his digesting system. He had to get this kind of moist or wetter food, and until October 7th, his fellow prisoner said he was okay. But then, because of the lack of food and the lack of medical treatment, he just starved to death.
What I also found interesting is how you laid out the report. Of course, you have details of the profile of the prisoners, the kind of abuse that's taking place, but you also have a section outlining the normative international system, legal system that governs how detainees should be treated. Humanitarian law, human rights law, Geneva Conventions, many other things. You outline all the things that are, the panoply of international law, which is supposed to protect Palestinian prisoners. So based on that, what other kind of crimes that is being committed from your point of view, from an international legal point of view, because you have a chapter on that, what are the kind of crimes? And do you think, I mean, because Israel is being investigated by the ICJ, International Court of Justice, do you think they will look into your report, and do you hope that they will actually use that as part of the submission and evidence to prosecute Israeli leaders for crimes against humanity as well?
So, as previously asked, I would say that Israel is unwilling and unable to investigate itself for its action, because it's not an accident, it's a policy. The apartheid is a policy. What's going on in the West Bank, what's going on in Gaza, and also what's going on in these torture camps are policy. You can't investigate your own policy, because that's how you want to act out in the world. So yeah, that's one. And we believe that what we've seen in those torture camps is, of course, a war crime, but in those amount, on this, why it's so systematic, it's so routine. And let me remind you that while we published this report earlier this month, there was about just a little bit near 10,000 Palestinians still are in those torture camps while we published. So that's why we conclude it might be even a crime against humanity. And yeah, as we saying for quite some time now, as I said just a couple of minutes before, Israel is unable and unwilling to investigate itself. That's why we are calling for international tribunals, and primarily the ICC, to take action and do what it has to do to stop those tortures and to bring a ceasefire and to make a deal for the return of the Israeli hostages.
So
Also,
if sorry.
I would also add, as part as this government doesn't care about Palestinians' human rights, okay. I mean, it's horrific. This government doesn't even care about their own citizens, hostages in Gaza. That's the moral law Israel is right now.
Yeah, and that seems to be the conclusion many are drawing based on the fact that Netanyahu has refused a number of peace deals where he could have had the hostages released. If hostages were your primary concern, then there's a deal on the table.
But it's not even B'Tselem claiming that. Okay,
yeah.
it's mainstream media, it's journalists, it's people, high-ranking officials in the Israeli military, and yeah, so. How can we expect Israel to investigate itself about Palestinians who are so-called the enemy or the other about human rights violations towards the Palestinians, while this government doesn't even show a slightest care for people who were taken and kidnapped from their homes while they're Israeli citizens. Yeah, that's the moral law. How low we are here, like the condition is.
Mm. We're talking about the moral law or shedding a spotlight on Israeli society, and I think I want to end with a question on that. We saw there's a lot of scrutiny on Israeli society at the moment, especially after the incident in Taman detention center, where prison guards were detained by Israeli officials for alleged rape of a Palestinian detainee. And in response, what we had was a protest, and a discussion within Israeli society, almost like, in support of rape of Palestinians. And that, I think, shocked many. So when you publish a report like this, do Israelis pay any attention? I know for people outside Israel, they do pay attention. Your report has garnered a lot of coverage. I'm sure you've been very busy giving interviews about your report, and from the UN to many other global institutions pay attention to your report. Does Israeli society pay any attention to your report, and do they and the revelations you make, do they look in the mirror and think, oh, is this how we've become?
I must say, in certain circles, yes, we do get quite a lot of attention, and there was even a lot of coverage in mainstream media, also in Channel 13, and of course Haaretz. But what's going on, and you mentioned about those protests in Taman, that after Hamas attack on October 7th, the process of dehumanizations towards Palestinians, it didn't start in October. It's a long-time project, the same as incarceration and apartheid. But this process of dehumanization of Palestinians reached a peak after, and this leads to what we've seen in Taman and other torture camps, when you don't treat Palestinians as human beings anymore. And also, as I said in some testimonies, that's exactly what the released detainees said. After October 7th, we weren't treated as human beings anymore.
So if you haven't read the report, I highly recommend it. We can download it from B'Tselem's website. It's called Welcome to Hell. I want to thank Shai for joining me. It's been really fascinating talking to you. Thank you for giving us your time and going through the details of your report. B'Tselem does fantastic work. You're always a reference for organizations like MEMO and many others. We're really indebted to you for the work that you do. Thank you so much for joining me, Shai, and thank you also for tuning in to our weekly conversation. And see you for another conversation with the Middle East Monitor. Bye-bye.
Bye, thank you.
This was Middle East Monitor Conversations, brought to you by the Middle East Monitor in London.